Hello and welcome to a New Games That Weren't video, where today we're going to be looking at a rather odd and sort of bizarre game called Sigue Sigue Sputnik. And this was a title that was due for release back in 1986 on the Commodore 64 and then later to be converted onto the Amstrad and the Spectrum. And this particular title was based on the band of the same name. So Sigue Sigue Sputnik, they were a band I hadn't really heard of back at the day. They kind of I think they were formed back in around about 1982 and then sort of hit this high popularity period around about 85, 86. They did, I think, a song called Love Missile or something that sort of reached number 3 in the charts, and they started to feature a little bit more on TV, I believe. So it's around about that time it was decided to make a game sort of based on that band. And my guess is that the inspiration was taken from Ocean Software's previous success with Frankie Goes to Hollywood just the year before. So if you're not familiar with the game, Frankie Goes to Hollywood was this amazing arcade adventure game designed by Denton Designs for Ocean, and you had to sort of complete a series of mini games and solve a murder mystery, and it was really cleverly done. And it scored very highly in the press at the time and won a lot of fans overall, so it's still fondly remembered today, and I still kind of dig it out occasionally as well. So they probably saw, publishers and developers saw the success of doing a game based on the band, and one particular duo took particular interest in Sigue Sigue Sputnik, and those two were Tony Gibson and Mark Harrison. So Tony Gibson on the left, he was the main programmer in the duo, and then Mark Harrison on the right, he was like the artist and the musician. And they were kind of no sort of strangers to doing musically themed games. They both worked together previously on Ghetto Blaster for Virgin Games, and also Tony worked on a game called Jammin'. So working on a game based on the band was kind of ideal for them, really. Additionally, the two guys were kind of used to working with sort of controversy. So Sigue Sigue Sputnik were apparently a fairly controversial band. I'm guessing because they were kind of wielding chainsaws or was blood or gore or something like that, which you'll kind of see in a moment what we're talking about. But additionally, Tony and Mark, they worked on games which had caused controversy as well. So they both worked together on Seaside Special for Task Set, which the idea of that game is that they had to clear up seaweed or toxic waste off the beach, and then once they collected it all, you then sort of transported yourself to number 10 Downing Street and had to throw that toxic waste at these politicians' heads, these caricatures, and I believe that caused a bit of a stir at the time, that particular game, even though there's much worse stuff coming out these days. So Tony and Mark, they got in touch with the main person at Sigue Sigue Sputnik, I think it's Tony James, and arranged to actually produce a prototype of the game to kind of then try and pitch to publishers, and Tony James was completely up for that. Because of course it's extra publicity and it's something else to help promote their band. So they started kind of they built this very quick prototype with the main lead singer and started getting in touch with the press. So here what we have is one of the press pieces that started to feature around about that, I'd say about late 86, maybe early 87. And this actually shows the loading screen that Mark Harrison had done for the game. So interestingly, they never actually showed anything of the prototype or the game itself in the press. They just kind of focused in on this loading screen, most likely because of the gore element and the shock element to it with the chainsaw and the severed head. And it sort of caught people's attention. The press, one of the particular magazines, kind of talked a bit about the prototype and explained how the game played and described the 4 sort of TV screens that you can see here. But that was it, really. It kind of sort of disappeared, really, and even though like the press pack was sent out to different publishers at the time, no one seemingly picked up on it and took it on board, which was a shame. So yeah, it kind of died a death once the press disappeared and nothing ever happened, and it kind of got forgotten about, really. It became somewhat almost legendary in the world of 64 unreleased games, and as a result, it was kind of put on the Games That Weren't website very early on, as we tried to sort of find out a bit more about it. So basically, when we started doing research about the game originally, we kind of believed that it was fake. We thought it was something that was kind of made up, or well, I did personally. I'd never heard of Sigue Sigue Sputnik before. I wasn't very cultured in music at all, so I'd never heard of them. And it just seemed all a bit too far-fetched, and I kind of wondered if it was something very similar to Mindsmear that Zap64 had done around about the same time as an April Fool's joke. But very quickly, thanks to the internet, we kind of had this information coming in, and we realised that it was an actual real game. And some of the first clues that we started to get about the title was through the actual album that Sigue Sigue Sputnik released. And at the end, they kind of had credits for the game, where they listed a guy called Tony Selinger, who we still don't know who that is exactly. Though, to be honest, we haven't done a huge amount of digging recently about that. And then there was Gibbo that was mentioned, and Gibbo was like the common nickname for Tony Gibson at the time. So we kind of made that connection early on, and based on Tony Gibson's connection to the game, we made the link with Mark Harrison as being the artist. And if you look sort of really closely at the loading screen, I don't know if you could just about make it out, in the bottom right corner you've got this sort of blue icon which has the initials MH. So we managed to kind of get the two developers confirmed, and then we kind of embarked on trying to find something of the game. Unfortunately, we didn't have any luck at all, so we couldn't find Tony and Mark at the time. So we kind of hit a few dead ends, and then suddenly we had a chap called Ben Hayes get in touch with the archive. So Ben Hayes was a musician who worked at Sonic Graffiti, and he also did a bit of games programming, I believe. But at one stage, around about 1989, 1990, he ended up working at Enigma Variations for a bit. And I don't know if he was visiting there, maybe doing some music for them, or what was going on. But essentially, he sat down at their 64, and he had this big box of 64 discs, and he was flicking through, and he encountered this prototype that you can see here on the screen. And he described to us about how this particular prototype and Sigue Sigue Sputnik game had these 4 TV screens and large sort of heads of different personalities and famous celebrities that would pop up, and you'd have to shoot at them. And he kind of described it in great detail, which matched the description that was in the magazines at the time. So Ben, he was a bit of a hoarder of stuff, so he kind of made a backup of this demo and took it home for himself, but sadly lost all his discs in a flood, and that was the end of it really. So he kind of believed that he'd lost maybe one of the only copies of the game. So that kind of it sort of sat a little bit stagnant for a while, and we didn't really have any further leads until then, maybe around about 2012, 2013. Darren Melbourne got in touch with Games That Weren't. And Darren had actually worked with Tony and Mark to try and promote the game and sort of get the press packs out there sent to different publishers to try and get their attention. And unfortunately, it didn't really quite work out. There was basically the asking price that Tony and Mark were asking for the game, which was £80,000, was seen as far too much. Plus, I don't think people were really sort of taken on by the actual concept that they had, and maybe the band wasn't big enough either as well. But apparently the game had interest from Nexus Software, so that's where Darren Melbourne, he was a producer at the time. He was working with Mark Greenshields, and they recently produced a shooter called Hades Nebula, which they eventually got published by Nexus. So those links there with Nexus meant that they were the most interested publisher overall, but I think they also got put off by the price and maybe the lack of the high profile band link and the game concept itself. Darren informed us that they did pitch to other companies with limited success as well. So Domark was one particular company that Darren remembered, but Tony and Mark going up to Domark with the game, demanding £80,000, and then being pretty much politely told to fuck off, in not so many words. So that was that, and the game was no more. But when he kind of mentioned this, Darren was sending all of his discs down to Games That Weren't to actually get them preserved. So he had all of his discs and some of Mark Greenshield's discs, and he was getting Games That Weren't to sort of back them up and preserve them, along with Andreas Wallstrom from 64.com. So we were going for all his discs, and we were saving a lot of Lost CompuNet demos, music by Mac Ray, and other bits and pieces, and some previews as well. And he suggested that it's very likely that he had a copy of the prototype that the guys had built. But after going through many hundreds of different discs, we had no joy at all. So we found nothing of the game. And so again, it kind of went quiet. And then suddenly, Darren got in touch a couple of years ago and said that he was sorting through his garage and he found another large box of discs. So we got naturally quite excited because it was yet another chance that we might actually find something in this prototype. So he sent the discs down very quickly, but unfortunately most of his discs were well labelled. They kind of what we found was he was very good at labelling his discs, that everything that he had labelled essentially would contain what they said. I know that wasn't always the case with a lot of discs that we had sent through. And majority of them were labelled, and there was nothing there that had Sigue Sigue Sputnik on it. So we're thinking that, you know, this game was very likely lost, and we're going to have a real struggle to find it. But I mean, something I forgot to mention as well is we did, around about the same time, we did actually manage to get in touch with Mark Harrison. And he also said that he no longer had any of his discs, unfortunately. So we had that ruled out as well. And we eventually also found out that sadly Tony Gibson had passed away quite a few years back. So again, there was all these doors being closed. So really, it was Darren who was like the kind of last opportunity to find something in the game potentially. So a lot was hanging on it. So while sorting through the discs, I found a couple that were unlabelled, so ones that what didn't have any distinctive label on them. So I kind of pulled them out in particular and had a quick look through them, and found a file called Media Wars. And it took a couple of attempts to get it to read. We had to clean the disc up a few times, and eventually managed to get it to load. And this is what we ended up with. So we have Sputnik at the top of the page, and then you got this cover of Love Missile. So we knew we got it saved. So that was absolutely awesome. And I did a little dance around the room when I saw this for the first time, and we kind of quickly got it backed up and eventually got released onto the Games at Work website. So you can sort of download this for yourself and check it out. So I'm just going to kick into it and show you what the publishers and the press saw at the time. So here we have these 4 TV screens, and as you shoot these kind of enemies with the high-res overlays that have been expanded, they then suddenly appear on the screens as like character-based backgrounds, and they continue animating as well. It's quite a neat little effect. The main character, Tony James, there, he's kind of very well animated. It looks pretty decent. There's not a huge amount to it at all. There's you can't actually die in the game or anything like that. You just you can shoot the enemies that shoot back at you, and the bullets don't really do anything to you at all, and you just kind of increase your score. If you shoot so many of the enemies about 4 times and then completely fill all the screens, it then resets and you get a different enemy that appears. And at some stage you start to get particular like politicians or famous people caricatures that appear that you have to then shoot, and they kind of shoot objects relating to them in some way. So at one stage you get Madonna, and she's like shooting shoes and money at you also, and then you got Prince Charles at some stage, which he's like shooting posh words at you. It's an I say or something like that. We'll try and see though some of those caricatures in a bit. I might have to fast forward it because this can go on for a bit of a while. So I'm going to try and at different stages as well as you play through, you get small advertisements pop up, so telling you a little bit about the game, so how much it costs. So it was going to be £80,000, and that was a message to the publishers. And you also had a little bit about the actual title itself. So the one thing that it mentions is that this is the first coming of Sigue Sigue Sputnik, and you know, to wait soon for the second coming. So I assume that they mean that there's going to be a second preview released or something. So my guess is that the intention was that this was meant to be just a mini game. Okay, so now we've gone to a red background. I think that might be potentially Jeff Minter, because sometimes this character would show with llamas, I think, flying around the screen. And there's Madonna, I think. So yeah, I think this was meant to be like a mini game with the main character. So the main thing was this well animated character who would maybe be dropped into different scenarios. And this was just one of the scenarios or one of the mini games you'd have to play. So that's my guess anyway. And the Second Coming may have shown more of that. I think that's Boy George there, shooting music notes at us. But of course, sadly with Tony Gibson no longer with us, we may never know for sure. Mark Harrison hasn't got any notes back from those days and didn't have any recollections really about the game. Is that Yuri Geller? I have no idea. If you can guess who some of these people are, then please feel free to leave some comments and I'll update the description. Yeah, so the one thing I forgot to mention as well is that I don't think Tony James was 100% happy with the preview overall. He wanted to see more chainsaws and gore apparently. So I don't know if maybe any of that feedback was taken on board or implemented at all. I mean, it's potential that we might see something with that kind of content coming up. I'll show you what I mean in a moment when I kind of finish off. Okay, so you've got someone shooting rip-off. So who's that meant to be? What I'm hoping to show you is one like the in-between text screens that sort of flash up. And it kind of confirms how much the game is going to be. In terms of like the publisher rights anyway. Freddie Mercury maybe? Poot. What does that even mean? I don't know. Okay. I think the text kicks in when it gets to a certain score. It's possible that there might be some hidden bits and pieces tucked away in this preview. I'm not much of a coder in terms of 64 code, so I don't know if there is anything in there, but if anyone notices anything in there that can be triggered off, anything that's not actually shown in the preview, please let us know. I noticed that there's a few bits of text in the background, like let's go and get ready and game over in the text. I don't know if there's anything that's locked off and not implemented. I think Significance is mentioned as the development crew. I think that's Johnny Rotten. Someone with no eyes. Shooting music. Okay, let's I might fast forward this. I just know that when I fast forward it to try and show you the other characters, the text is going to come up, because that would be sod's law. Come on. George Michael, maybe? Did he have a beard around about then? Bit of stubble. And is that Michael Jackson shooting llamas? Like a zombified Michael Jackson? Phil Collins. There you go. Come on, there's got to be some text coming up. I'm going to fast forward in a minute and you just... It's definitely going to come up with the text then. Okay. Blonde person shooting knickers. There we go. It's a brief text flash up. Anyway, there's one that talks about the second coming. That this is the first coming, and then there'll be the second coming soon. Right, I'm going to fast forward a bit to see if there's any other characters I can spot. Oh. No, I think that's pretty much it. Feel free to download it for yourself and have a look through. There's quite a few other sprites in there I think that haven't been shown yet. So let's finish up on there. Okay. So yeah, we're not quite finished though with the search. So this image that I've shown you a few times already, this is of a press pack that kind of surfaced about a year or so ago. on an eBay auction, and someone managed to come across this particular pack, and it's been confirmed by Mark Harrison that this is a proper legitimate pack that was released at the time to the press. Unfortunately, the eBay auction was too much, really. I couldn't really afford to pick it up for the archive, so I don't know if anyone has purchased it or if it's still in the hands of the actual eBay seller. But the main reason we want to kind of get hold of it is because, as we saw earlier, there's this loading screen here that that Mark Harrison did, which unfortunately was not with the preview that we've preserved, and this is still at large. And it would be really nice to try and get that sort of digitally preserved and on the website as well. But in addition to that, it's possible that there might be a slightly different version of the preview, maybe with the changes that Tony James said. So in the loading screen, we've got the gore element with the chainsaw and the severed head. So maybe Tony gave that feedback and they implemented that, and then maybe this other press pack is, maybe it's the second coming, who knows, maybe it is that kind of second preview they did with another mini game or something. We just don't know until we get hold of one of these discs and check through it. So that's kind of the next step for us, really, is to try and see if we can get hold of one of these and see if we can preserve anything more of the game. Okay, so that is pretty much it on Sigue Sigue Sputnik. Please do download it for yourself and check it out in any 64 emulator or on your real machine. We hope you enjoyed the video and some of the sort of story behind how it was found and other details, and feel free to leave any comments or any corrections or anything, and we'll get back to you soon with a new video. Thank you very much.